year is 1984. A film hits theaters that nobody at Paramount Pictures is fully confident about. The script has been rewritten so many times that cast members are receiving fresh pages between takes. The director is chain-smoking through stress levels that would hospitalize a lesser human being. And the lead actor wasn't even supposed to be there. 40 years later, the picture is a cultural monument, quoted at barbecues, rewatched by people who have already seen it 14 times and will gladly make it 15. But here is what most fans never figured out. The version you fell in love with almost didn't exist. What the cast has revealed over 40 years of interviews and behind-the-scenes accounts is a story far wilder than anything Axel Foley ever improvised. 2-star replacements, a coin flip, a fruit bowl raid, a caffeine-fueled improv explosion, and a police chief who walked into a scene holding the screenplay he hadn't had time to memorize. Here are 13 things the cast has revealed about how the picture survived its own production, and the evidence that's been hiding in plain sight on screen the whole time. Number 1. Eddie Murphy wasn't Plan A or Plan B. Eddie Murphy wasn't Plan A. He wasn't Plan B either. The character of Axel Foley was born in the mind of a writer who never played him, almost played by an actor who would have destroyed him, and finally handed to a 23-year-old who transformed him into one of the most iconic characters in cinema history. Plan A was Mickey Rourke. The script he signed on to barely resembled the picture that exists today, a dark, gritty, violent action piece closer to Death Wish than to comedy. Paramount paid Rourke $400,000 just to hold the role while the script went through development. $400,000, not to film a single scene, just to wait. His contract eventually expired, he walked away, and the studio had spent nearly $500,000 on a ghost. Plan B was Sylvester Stallone. He signed on, actively rewrote the script, stripped out what little comedy remained, and renamed the main character Axel Foley, a name that sounds less like a Detroit detective and more like a villain in an airport paperback. He envisioned massive explosions and ultra-violent set pieces that had Paramount executives doing panicked math on napkins. 2 weeks before filming, Stallone walked away. He later recycled much of his rewrite into his 1986 film Cobra. Nobody is still quoting Cobra at barbecues. With 2 weeks to go before cameras rolled, Paramount called Eddie Murphy. He stepped into a production still shaped by Stallone's grim, humorless vision. The script Murphy received wasn't funny. It was the opposite of everything he was as a performer. What happened next is what the cast has been talking about for 4 decades. Number 2. The script pages hiding in plain sight in the final cut. There is a piece of evidence hiding in the final cut that changes the way you watch the film. The script was being rewritten during production at a pace that would have shut down most studio pictures. Revised pages were being handed to actors between setups. Dialogue was being swapped out minutes before takes. The screenplay was a living document, and it was living fast. In one scene, all of that is permanently visible if you know what to look for. When Chief Hubbard storms into the Beverly Hills Police Department to confront Axel and the detectives, pay close attention to what actor Stephen Elliott is carrying. Those rolled-up papers he holds throughout the scene. The ones that look like police reports, case files, the kind of official documents a busy chief would naturally carry through his own department. Those are his script pages. Elliott had received revised dialogue so close to the shoot that he hadn't had time to memorize his lines. Rather than stalling production, he grabbed the pages, rolled them up to look like something that belonged in a police chief's hand, and walked onto the set holding a screenplay that was still being revised, while the picture around it was being filmed. Director Martin Brest saw it. He knew exactly what those papers were. He left the moment in the final cut. Ronnie Cox, who played Lieutenant Bogomil, was reportedly delivering dialogue in the same scene that was approximately 30 minutes old. The ink was practically still wet. Most productions rehearse for weeks. This one was handing actors warm pages and pointing them toward a camera, trusting the performers to make it work. They did. Number 3. The banana was supposed to be a potato. The banana in the tailpipe is one of the most quoted gags of the decade. It was never supposed to be a banana. The original script called for potatoes. Dense, solid, mechanically plausible. From an engineering standpoint, the potato was the practical choice. From a cinematic standpoint, the potato is boring. And the universe seems to have agreed. The production had been denied kitchen access at the Beverly, Wilshire Hotel, where the scene was being filmed. There was no time to negotiate with the property managers. The crew needed a substitute fast, so they raided a decorative fruit bowl in the hotel lobby, grabbed a bunch of bananas, and handed them to Eddie Murphy, like it was always the plan. The prop changed. The dialogue changed. Murphy improvised the line, "I ain't falling for no banana in my tailpipe," on the spot. A hotel lobby fruit bowl gave the picture one of its most enduring catchphrases. The practical problem became the creative solution. The solution has been quoted at barbecues for 40 years. Number 4, coffee, caffeine, and the super cop improv. Director Martin Brest later described his job on this film as less of a traditional creative relationship with his lead actor and more of a controlled experiment in what happens when you point a camera at a force of nature and refuse to call cut. Murphy and Brest, knowing the script was fundamentally wrong for this performer, made a decision that could have gone catastrophically sideways. They leaned into improvisation, not for a scene here or there, but for entire sequences. The picture was being rebuilt in real time, while a full studio crew stood around waiting to see what Axel Foley would say next. Judge Reinhold later described it as one of the most exhilarating and terrifying acting experiences of his career. You couldn't prepare for what Murphy was going to do. You couldn't rehearse your reaction to something that didn't exist until he invented it. Your only job was to stay in the moment and not break, which sounds manageable until you understand that Murphy was actively trying to be as funny as possible, and every instinct in your body was screaming to laugh. The most famous example is the super cop scene, where Axel storms into the police station with a completely unhinged story about a secret detective task force. Most of what Murphy says in that scene was not in any version of the script. He had been exhausted that day, rarely touched caffeine, but someone handed him a cup of coffee. He took a couple of sips. Whatever that small amount did to his system hit like a switch being thrown. He abandoned the written dialogue entirely and started machine gunning words at a room full of actors who had no idea what was coming. Watch the scene again tonight. Watch John Ashton physically pinch himself to avoid breaking. Watch Reinhold turn away, jaw clenched, fighting a laugh that's about to end the take. The camera kept rolling because stopping Eddie Murphy in that state would have been like pulling the plug on the greatest live performance anyone on set had ever witnessed. Number 5. A coin flip and 7 packs of cigarettes. Martin Brest had been fired from War Games before this picture. He wasn't arriving with momentum. He was arriving with a bruised ego and real doubts about jumping back into a high-pressure studio production that already smelled like a project that could collapse. Producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer pursued him hard. Brest made his decision the way no studio meeting ever anticipates. He pulled out a quarter. Heads, he took the job. Tails, he walked. It landed heads. He later framed the coin and hung it on his office wall. The making of the film nearly broke him anyway. Every take was a question of whether the tone was landing or tipping over into parody on one end, or grim thriller on the other. Revised pages were arriving so close to shooting that actors were sometimes performing dialogue less than an hour old. On one particularly brutal production day, Brest reportedly smoked 7 packs of cigarettes, roughly 140 cigarettes between action and cut. The film he made under those conditions became the highest-grossing release of 1984. It beat Ghostbusters, it beat Indiana Jones, and The Temple of Doom. It was the first R-rated film ever to cross $200 million domestically in its original theatrical run. That R-rated comedy box office record stood for 25 years, until The Hangover claimed it in 2009. A coin flip and 7 packs of cigarettes bought cinema 4 decades of Axel Foley. Number 6. Bronson Pinchot stole the movie with an imaginary accent. Bronson Pinchot came in to audition for the art gallery clerk, a character with a handful of lines, essentially set dressing with dialogue. What he walked in with was an accent that seemed to originate from a country that does not appear on any map, vaguely European, delivered with the bone-deep confidence of someone who has never once questioned whether the way they talk is unusual. Martin Brest, by multiple accounts, stopped the audition and began rethinking the character's entire scope on the spot. Pinchot has since revealed where Serge came from, a makeup artist Pinchot had worked with on a previous project. Someone with that casually condescending confidence that makes you feel underdressed just by standing near them. He amplified that energy to a level the original person would have found offensive, wrapped it in the mystery accent, and arrived at Serge. Other roles in the picture were trimmed to make room. Exposition was cut. Scenes were rearranged. The film quietly reorganized itself around a character who was never supposed to matter because Pinchot was too good to keep minor. He reprised the role in 2 sequels and again in the Netflix continuation decades later. Once a character that good exists in a franchise, the studio does not retire him. Number 7. The Mumford High Sweatshirt started a national fashion movement. The Mumford High School sweatshirt that Axel Foley wears throughout the picture was not designed as product placement. It wasn't a branding exercise. It wasn't a deliberate choice made to generate merchandise revenue or establish character identity through apparel. The costume department needed Axel to look like he actually came from somewhere. They wanted him to feel authentic, a man whose wardrobe told the truth about his life, before expensive restaurants, polished precincts, and people who used summer as a verb. Mumford High School was a real Detroit public school. The sweatshirt was real school merchandise. Someone grabbed it because it felt right, threw it on the biggest movie star in America, and didn't give it a second thought. Then the picture became the biggest film of 1984. Mumford High was suddenly buried under mail orders. Thousands of them. Fans in California, New York, Texas, people who had never been within 500 miles of Michigan, were writing in desperate to own the sweatshirt Axel Foley wore. A Detroit public school's standard-issue gym apparel had become an object of desire for the entire country, and the school was completely unprepared. Knockoffs flooded the market. Official replicas followed. Decades later, you can still purchase licensed versions online. A throwaway wardrobe decision made because it felt authentic has been generating sales and cultural recognition for over 40 years. The sweatshirt is still available. Mumford High School itself closed in 2017. Number 8. Inspector Todd was played by a real Detroit cop. Gil Hill was a real Detroit homicide inspector when Martin Brest found him during location scouting. Brest had walked into an actual Detroit police station looking for atmosphere and walked past a man sitting behind a desk who looked and sounded so precisely like Inspector Todd, the perpetually exasperated boss who tolerates Axel's chaos only because he legally has to, that no traditional casting process could have manufactured it. Hill had 0 film credits, 0 acting training. What he had was decades of actual experience telling people exactly what to do and watching them do it immediately. Because in his real life, the people he was directing weren't scene partners. Brest's reported direction was simple to the point of genius. Don't act, just be yourself. It worked completely. Hill came back for both sequels. That was his entire Hollywood career. After the franchise wrapped, he ran for mayor of Detroit. Most actors chase bigger roles after a hit. Gil Hill chased an entire city. Number 9. The Stakeout Scene. Started as a casting room argument, one of the most beloved comedy pairings of the 1980s was not cast in any traditional way. John Ashton and Judge Reinhold did not walk into a casting room and read prepared dialogue from a sides packet. Martin Brest brought them into a room together and told them to talk about anything. No script, no sides, just two actors and Brest watching to see if any real chemistry existed between them. They started arguing, an improvised dispute about diet, digestion, and whether Rosewood was essentially carrying 5 pounds of undigested red meat in his body. Ashton went full grumpy dad, contemptuous, dismissive. Reinhold went wide-eyed and indignant, absolutely certain he was making valid medical points that Ashton lacked the sophistication to appreciate. They bickered like two people stuck together in a car for 6 hours with broken air conditioning. Brest liked the audition argument so much that he scripted the stakeout scene around it, essentially asking Ashton and Reinhold to recreate their casting room fight on camera. That is why the stakeout sequence feels so organic and lived in. Two actors started arguing about bowel movements in a casting room and accidentally invented one of the great comedy partnerships of the decade. Number 10. 4 chart hits from one soundtrack. The soundtrack didn't merely support the film, it colonized the entire year of 1984 and left marks on the decade that are still visible today. The centerpiece was a track that had no business becoming a pop hit by any commercial logic of the era. Axel F., composed by Harold Faltermeyer, was a pure instrumental. No lyrics, no vocalist, no chorus to carry it. In 1984, instrumentals did not chart. They certainly did not chart high. The conventions of pop radio demanded vocals, demanded narrative, demanded something for a listener to sing along with. Axel F. reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. It parked itself between power ballads and rock anthems and simply refused to leave because the entire country was already humming it involuntarily. The rest of the album hit just as hard. Glenn Frey's The Heat Is On peaked at number 2 and became the unofficial anthem of every high-speed 1980s movie montage ever committed to film. Neutron Dance by the Pointer Sisters landed in the top 10, synced to the opening truck chase, with the kind of kinetic energy that grabs an audience in the first minute and refuses to let go. New Attitude by Patti LaBelle cracked the top 20 and gave LaBelle one of the biggest hits of her career. 4 songs, 4 charting singles, all from the same picture. Most film soundtracks are lucky to produce a single memorable track. This one produced 4 chart hits and a musical identity so distinctive that the opening bars of Axel F. still function as an instant cultural signal 40 years later. You hear those first 3 notes and you know exactly where you are. Number 11. Axel Foley was originally a Pittsburgh cop named Ellie. Here is a piece of origin history that even dedicated fans rarely know. Axel Foley wasn't originally from Detroit. The very first draft of the story, written by screenwriter Daniel Bach in 1981 under the title Beverly Drive, featured a Pittsburgh cop, and the character's name wasn't Axel Foley. It was Axel Ellie. Axel Ellie, the name of someone who leaves handwritten thank you notes and gets upset about minor plumbing issues. It shares almost no DNA with the Axel Foley who talked his way into hotel rooms he had no business being in, and out of situations that should have ended his career inside the first 20 minutes. The premise had the same skeleton. Blue-collar cop investigates a murder in Beverly Hills. Culture clash ensues. But the tone was different. It was gritty and humorless, playing straight without any comedic relief. Over the course of a decade-long journey from that first draft to the finished picture, through multiple writers, multiple rewrites, and Stallone's near-fatal rewrite that nearly turned the project into something unrecognizable, the character evolved. Pittsburgh became Detroit. Ellie became Foley. Straight-faced revenge thriller became something looser and funnier and infinitely more rewatchable. The transformation was not clean or deliberate. It was the product of chaos and compromise, and a series of decisions made under pressure by people who were figuring out what the picture wanted to be while they were making it. The Axel Foley that audiences fell in love with isn't the character that was originally written. He is the character who survived everything that tried to turn him into something lesser. Number 12. Eddie Murphy killed the CBS spinoff by refusing to show up. In 2013, someone at CBS decided that this franchise needed to become a network procedural. The decision raises questions about what exactly that person thought the original picture was, but let's follow the story. CBS developed a full pilot. The main character was Aaron Foley, Axel's son, working as a Beverly Hills detective in the present day. The pilot was directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, the man responsible for Men in Black, which gave the project genuine creative credibility. And Eddie Murphy wasn't just lending his name to a press release. He actually showed up in the pilot, guest starring as Axel Foley and signing on as executive producer. The pilot went to test screenings. Here is where it gets interesting. Audiences reacted so enthusiastically to Murphy's appearance that CBS wanted him back. Not as a one-time guest, but on a recurring basis. Come back every few episodes. Be the legacy anchor. Give the show the Axel Foley stamp of approval on a semi-regular schedule. Murphy said no. He was not interested in returning to television in any ongoing capacity, and he was absolutely not going to spend his career making guest appearances in his own franchise on a network schedule. Without Murphy's recurring commitment, CBS lost interest quickly. Sonnenfeld later suggested that corporate turf battles between CBS and Paramount, the kind of executive chess matches that have nothing to do with storytelling, may have played a role in the project's death. The pilot was shelved. The TV version never made it to air. A decade later, Murphy returned to the role in the Netflix continuation Axel F on his own terms, in a format he chose. 40 years after the original, he was still the only person who got to decide what happened to Axel Foley. Number 13, 3 people all claim they invented Axel Foley. Somebody in Hollywood invented this picture. The question of who is considerably more complicated than it has any right to be, because 3 entirely different people have claimed the credit with the full conviction of people who are not guessing. Claim number 1. Former Paramount president Michael Eisner has said the idea came to him in 1975 after he was pulled over in Beverly Hills while driving what he described as a battered station wagon. The officer who stopped him was polished, refined, Beverly Hills to his core. Eisner walked away convinced that the cultural collision between street-level grit and manicured wealth had a film in it. Claim number 2. Producer Don Simpson, one half of the legendary Simpson-Bruckheimer partnership, has said he developed the concept in 1977. A tough, streetwise cop dropped into the wealthy, insulated bubble of Beverly Hills. Claim number 3, former undercover Beverly Hills officer Lynn Franklin has believed the picture borrowed heavily from his 1976 memoir Sword of Justice. Franklin has alleged that screenwriter Daniel Petrie Jr. had access to his book years before the script existed, and that the resemblance was not a coincidence. He considered legal action. So the scoreboard reads, 1 studio president with a speeding ticket, 1 mega producer with an ego proportional to his vision, 1 actual cop with a manuscript and a very specific theory about where Hollywood did its homework. All 3 walked away certain that Axel Foley came from them. That a picture with 3 competing origin stories somehow emerged as a coherent and beloved classic is either a miracle or evidence that some films are simply determined to exist